Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Rabbi Michael Parise. I'm the Rabbi of Temple Sinai of Cinnaminson. On behalf of the Nemiroff family, we thank you for coming to honor the memory of an amazing man. Honoring one's memory. I believe it was Craig yesterday when we met said, Rabbi, how do you honor one's memory? I said there are two ways. In Judaism, we believe the body and the soul are two distinct entities, that at birth they come together and at death they separate. Now, whether you believe in the soul or not, I do, one thing is for certain. The people we love, the people we've lost, they live on, right here. Everything Richard was, all his memories, all his joys, all his challenges, they live on in you. You honor his memory by taking the best parts of him and making a part of you. And the second way we honor someone's memory is by telling their story, which we are going to do today. But we're going to begin our service with the reciting of Psalm 23. If you know these words, I invite you to say them with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And let us all say, Amen. I always find these words from Kohelet resonant in times like these. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Dr. Richard Nemiroff was born April 2nd, 1942, to Ruth and Nathan Nemiroff. Ruth was whip smart, very smart. She went to law school. But like many people of that era, she was relegated to the home as a homemaker to help her husband taking care of his business. Nathan was a true community doctor. Everywhere they went, people would say, "You're the son of Nathan Nemiroff." He was an amazing man. He served in World War II. He was in the third wave at Normandy. Mark told me that his unit, I think, did more pints of blood than any other unit, maybe in military history for all we know. True pathological miracle. He's an amazing man. They lived in Oradell, New Jersey. Richard was the oldest, very smart. Not super athletic in the traditional sense, but quietly athletic, with anything that had to do with grace and precision and accuracy. He loved to ski. He loved the outdoors. Mark was born 6 years later, and Mark looked up to his big brother. He was his protector. Nobody would lay a finger on Mark as long as Richard was around, unless it was Richard himself. But that changed because you see Mark. He's a big guy. I'm sure he wasn't a little boy. At some point, that must have flipped, and I'm sure he knew it. They were a very close-knit family. Your middle-class Jewish family. Work hard, Jewish values. Richard was very much in love with the outdoors. In high school, he worked on a farm. He loved motocross and hunting and sharpshooting. I believe Craig said he would have made the perfect redneck if he wasn't Jewish. Not your typical interest for a Jersey Jewish boy, but that's who he was. Mark and Rich, from the earliest age, wanted to be doctors. How could they not with their father? Mark went into anesthesiology, and Richard would become an OBGYN. He studied at Cornell first, and then went to medical school at Jefferson. Around that time, in 1968, there was a very nice young Jewish girl from Salem, New Jersey, who went by the name Barbara Levinson. She was also going to school in Philadelphia. They didn't know each other, but I would believe it was Dr. Bill Grossman who would set them up on a blind date. And I asked Barbara, what was the blind date like? And she said she was very taken with his strength, as he was very taken with his strength. He's very strong, very into throwing discs. I'm not really sure what they call that, discus. I said, you must have been really attracted to him. She said, I kind of found him odd, right? He was a little odd. He had odd interests. Like I said, sharpshooting, those are odd interests. But there was an attraction there. There was a draw. He said, if you behave, I'll take you to my family Seder. But she was the real prize, because when he took her to that family Seder, he said, this is Barbara Levinson, beautiful last name. The mother had Naches, a Jewish girl? Oh boy, Richard didn't date many of those. I would imagine there was a lot of love, immediately, because Richard was given the opportunity to go work in a very prestigious foreign program, but he decided not to do that. Instead, he went to work at Lankenau, which is not Italy or France. I don't know where he was going, but it's not those places. But he stayed behind for you. I think that really said a lot about his commitment to you. They would get married. 1971, Craig was born. 4 years later, Rachel. And they both described their father as a workaholic, somebody who really was committed to his work in all senses of the word. But when he had free time, it was devoted to them. Many people who worked as hard as Richard might get burned out, might want to go out with the friends on the weekend, but every moment he had, he would spend with his family. They said sometimes when they would have a day off from school, he would take them out of school, even on half days, and they just go skiing in the Poconos. He loved spending time with them, instilling in them the values that he cherished. Working hard, determination, being passionate about things. He loved to encourage their hobbies. He could be his expectations could be high, but I think he just loved seeing you excel in whatever you were passionate about. He was a great OB. The work was not always easy. He did life-saving abortions at a time when it was very risky to perform such procedures in America. The fundamentalists at the time would truly threaten his life to the point where he had to hire security and carry a gun. But that was the job he was committed to doing. That's what he believed in. You know, Richard probably didn't always think he was as successful as he really was. There was always one more thing to accomplish, but he had so many great successes. But I think the biggest one was all of you, his family and friends. I think that was his greatest success. He loved people. He loved telling stories. He loved BSing. He would just make things up. He was ornery. That's what Barbara said. He was ornery. He would just sometimes lie about things, He was a character. He was a character. But he loved people, and he loved his family. He loved being a grandfather. He loved all of you. That made him so happy. I can only imagine the pride. But I didn't know Richard the way some of you did. So I do want to invite up some family members. I'm going to call up Craig first, his son, to share a few words.
Wow, big crowd. It's touching to see all of you make a trip to honor my father on such short notice. I don't enjoy public speaking, but my father, he relished the opportunity to speak to a crowd. And were he here, he might have spoken to you on the importance of checking your cholesterol and the wonders of Crestor. My father loved an audience, and he, as Rabbi said, he would tell stories often with fanciful embellishments. As a child, my father would tell me about the adventures of my Uncle Mark and his band of merry men as they traveled the world in search of fortune and hidden treasure. It was only later in life that I learned that only some of those stories were true. My father loved being a doctor. He had a passion for the craft and was a dedicated advocate for his patients. For much of his career, he would take calls at any hour. There was one patient who woke him at 2 in the morning. She had just consummated with her boyfriend, and for the first time in many years, she was not able to climax. My father, being a board-certified gynecologist, knew what to do. He told her to head straight to the nearest emergency room. This is a true story. The part of the job that gave him the most satisfaction, I believe, was being a teacher. For those of you who are New Jersey residents, you should know that the vanity license plate CL Prof, or clinical professor, is now available. There are countless medical students, residents, and colleagues who have learned from him, been inspired, and also, I'm sure at times, terrified of him, should they have made a mistake. I'm very proud to be his son. He did not choose the easiest path. He did put his own life in danger so they could provide needed care to women in their most desperate hours, when most others in the field just left this job to him. He was a doctor who carried a gun to work. Not many need to do that. He may have been haunted by memories of Vietnam and friends who were lost while he was in medical school, but he served this country and his community in other ways, with bravery and with honor. I do not think that I will have as great an impact on the world as my dad did. But one thing I do hope to do is give my own children the gift he gave to me, knowing that I had a father who absolutely adored me. That has been a constant in my life. And as my family grew, he loved my wife Liz and my kids Sam and Jack. My father's last words to me, when he still had his wits about him and had recently been told of the grim condition of his cardiac function, was, "Well, that's how it goes. You know, I've always thought of you as a superstar. I'm so proud of you." Right back at you, Dad. Right back at you.
Very nice. Thank you, Craig. Beautiful. We're next going to call up Andrew, Richard's grandson.
Lou, such great words by the rabbi and my Uncle Craig. You know, me and my grandfather, who I called Pop-Pop, and my siblings called Pop-Pop, my cousins Sam and Jack called Pop-Pop, was a very important person in my life. I would say that besides my parents, there is no one who I was closer to through my first 19 years of life. Pop-Pop always knew how to make someone laugh. He would come up with goofy songs like Pop-Pop's Nose or stories that were just ridiculous. And he always put a smile on everyone's face. You know, whenever Pop-Pop came over for a holiday, a birthday, just to pop in and say hi, he was bursting with energy. He would give each of his grandkids a huge hug and kiss and said how good we were looking. He always liked to say how good we were looking, and, you know, it was nice. Pop-Pop knew how to enter a room, and, you know, he was good at it. I am privileged to have known Pop-Pop the longest out of all the grandkids. I guess this is one of the benefits of being the oldest. Pop-Pop taught me so much when I was a kid, I couldn't even put it in a speech, but I'll try. he taught me how to ride a bike, which it wasn't the easiest, as a kid. And at the moment, I wouldn't consider myself the most athletic guy. Pop-Pop knew that teaching me how to ride a bike would be a challenge, but, he was up for the task. He drove me up to his Berkshire home to spend a weekend learning how to ride a bike. First, he bought me the coolest bike, it was black and red, and I thought it was really cool. Then it was lesson time. We got back from the store, we drove back to the home, and, we went out on the grass. I tried again and again, but I kept on falling. He made sure to tell me every time I got back on the bike to look straight ahead. Don't look at the tree. Don't look at the ground. But for some reason, this concept was difficult for me to understand. I kept falling on my ass again and again and again. After crying, he said, let's take a quick break. We went into the hot tub, and he told me that, I had all the skills to succeed. You just need to relax. I was so tense when I was on that bike. But eventually, after some proper motivation, I could do it. And for the next few years, I'd, go up to the Berkshires with Pop-Pop, and we'd go riding around the rural roads. Here was Pop-Pop in his early 70s, riding with me on the streets of the Berkshires, cruising and having a blast. Those were the days I'll never forget. Not only did Pop-Pop teach me how to ride a bike, but he also taught me how to ski. And I think, he taught his daughter Rachel and son Craig a lot of similar things. He got me ski lessons at Butternut in the Berkshires. After the lesson, Pop-Pop would practice with me down the slopes. And again, in his 70s, he was, going down in perfect form, just like his dad once did. If I'm doing that when I'm in my 70s, I guess I'm doing something right. The last, little moment I'd like to highlight was the longest time I ever spent with Pop-Pop was when I joined him, his nephew Russell, and his brother Mark on a fishing trip in Ontario, Canada. This is a trip that Pop-Pop would take his kids, my mom Rachel and Uncle Craig, on when they were kids. I was so glad that I was able to be included in what for him was such a special occasion. 3 generations embarked on the amazing Canadian fishing adventure. On this trip, I learned how to fish through help from Pop-Pop and the excellent guide. I enjoyed some great food, and I got to learn more. I got to learn about one of me and Pop-Pop's favorite subjects, history. This trip had so many great memories that I could talk about for hours. I even have a memory book that goes through all the, experiences from this trip. We always talked about going back, and maybe someday I'll be back there with my kids, and continue the tradition. I'd also like to highlight something which I know the rabbi and I know Craig highlighted, which is his amazing career as a clinical professor of obstetrics and gynecology. Pop-Pop was not only a great doctor, but he was a champion of women's rights. He helped thousands of women receive proper medical care regardless of income. His patients and colleagues saw him as a great doctor and, most importantly, a great person. When I went on their website for Pennsylvania Hospital, he had 175 reviews, 4.9 stars out of 5. I'd say that's pretty damn good. I'd like to read 2 of those stellar reviews right here because I feel like it just says so much about him. I've been a patient of his for the past 33 years. All of my daughters belong to his practice as well. I truly feel blessed to have him watching over my health care and my daughters. He has never given me bad advice about anything. Whatever my ailment, I get his opinion first. He and Dr. Mellon both were truly a blessing to me and my family. Here's one more. These are just great. I've been blessed to be with Dr. Nemiroff's patient for more than 20 years. Not only Dr. Nemiroff is a superb physician, he is also one of a kind and a great human being. He is passionate about preventative medicine for women's health and cares about his patients. He's taught me so many good philosophy of managing our health. He advocates for treatment of diseases affecting women and always stays on top of our health issues. Dr. Nemiroff is very knowledgeable in other medical fields besides OBGYN. Dr. Nemiroff truly represents the best doctors in America, and he has set an exceptional example of many young doctors to follow. Above all, I really enjoy working with Dr. Nemiroff. The last thing I'm going to do before I head out, and I know I'm getting a little long, but there's so many great things to say about this man. Over the years, I kept some voicemails from my grandfather, and this one from 2018, when I was in 8th grade, I think really sticks out and really shows, the humor he had. Andrew, it's Pop-Pop. I'm afraid to press number 1 for more options. I don't know what they are. This may be a sabotaged call from the Buffalo Bills, who I might add played one of the worst games yesterday in the history of me watching professional or college ball. For lack of a better description, it was a 3-hour waste of time. I hope this call finds you well, growing vertically, enjoying life at its tip-top best when uninterrupted exasperations of accomplishments and good things. I trust that you went on your 2-day hike this weekend. If there is an outrageous, meaningless task, you and I are just the men for it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. I love you, Pop-Pop.
Beautiful. Next, we're going to call up Owen.
Hello, my name is Owen Baskin, and I am Richard Nemiroff's grandson. I come here today still in disbelief that any of this is real. It happened so fast in so little time. Seeing him at the end was something that felt unsettling in many ways, but still me and my mom, Rachel, were there until the end. But when my siblings said goodbye, they said something to the nurse before that really made me think. My brother Andrew told the very nice nurse that he was always fighting for women's rights and was standing up for people even though he got nothing in return. And he did this for 50 years. If you knew Richard, you would know that he loved telling stories. He told tons of stories, from him riding on a hippo to our house, to the frogs talking to him, or even stories from his past. But always, my favorite story he shared with me were the stories about his father. His father fought for what was right in World War II and many other events. And as well as being such a tough fighter, he is also told to be one of the sweetest people my mom knew. And when I was in the hospital, I realized Pop-Pop and his dad were very similar. Both of them fought for what was right, even though they both risked their life, while still being the light in the room. And hopefully, me and my siblings can accomplish what they did. If you knew my Pop-Pop, you would know how sweet of a guy he was. When I got COVID back in July, no one came outside to say hi to me, besides him. He was willing to risk his health just so he could talk to his grandkid for as long as he could. Me and him always clicked like that in a way, where he was always willing to talk to me whenever I needed to. He was always there for me since I was born, from going to every show I was in to showing up to every Thanksgiving besides 2021. Him coming to see us on a weekend made me feel so happy because he was always willing to talk and watch movies. I remember we watched, I think, The Nun one day, and I was not able to sleep. So I went up to him when he was asleep, and we talked it out. And eventually I was able to go back to sleep, but Josh wasn't that helpful. Even at a younger age, when we would go to their house occasionally, he introduced me to one of our favorite things in the whole world, Star Wars. I will always remember going every few months to the Berkshires with him, taking turns going on the tractor or watching a disc of Mom's younger birthdays. Whenever we played it, Mom would always get really annoyed at us. But something only me and Pop-Pop could really connect to was his fishing pond. It was peaceful with plants and a bunch of frogs that he enjoyed so dearly. Whenever we sat on the bench next to the pond, we could just talk and reflect on life and wait for Mom to call us that we were going to go somewhere. Even on his hardest days, he still was himself around me. If you knew him, you would know he was a huge fan of the Eagles. When he passed, the Eagles won, so I told him many, many times. And I told him before he left a bunch of things, but I ended by saying to him, "Fly high now." He may have died from heart failure, but his heart was the biggest I knew. He really did try to be a great-grandfather, and I could not have asked for it in any other way. I love you, Pop-Pop. Rest in peace.
And we're just going to call up Hannah.
Okay. I won't go on for too long because they both had a lot to say, but I love my pop-up a lot. He always said I was the favorite granddaughter. My grandfather was a pretty cool guy. He wore a lot of funky hats, he drove a motorcycle, and he grew watermelons in his garden. He always had something interesting to share with us, and when he didn't, he made something up. He was the best storyteller, as you've heard, and his tales often involved my grandmother, Nana, riding some kind of animal, sometimes a giraffe, sometimes a rhino. He actually did go on a safari once, so I think she did interact with safari animals once upon a time, but those were the frequent subjects of the stories. Pop-Up also loved his grandchildren more than anything, as you've heard. He always made us feel like the most special kids in the world, and he gave great hugs and sometimes, much to my mom's dismay, came bearing frogs in buckets that he would capture from his pond up in the Berkshires, and he would drive them all the way down to New Jersey so that we could release them in our backyard. He always loved doing little things like that just to make us smile. I'm so grateful to have gotten to experience Pop-Up's love and care for the first 17 years of my life. He was a very present grandfather and played a significant role in my childhood. He always sat near the kids' table at every holiday to stay close to us, and he took my older brother Andrew and I on special trips to the Berkshires, just us three. And that was one of the perks of being the older kids, getting to spend that special time with our grandfather. And the trips were without parents, which was always fun. And he would even just stop by all the time when he was driving home from the Berkshires just to say hi and check in on us. I really wish that he could be there for the rest of it. I wanted so bad for him to come to sit in the audience of my final high school play, just as he has for the past 12 years of performances. I have never seen a man who was so interested in professional theater take so much amusement in the terrible productions that I was a part of. But he and my grandmother, Nana, always had something to say. They were so invested. These were not good shows, and they'd be at the opera one night and at, like, Annie Jr. the next. It was crazy. I really wanted him to come visit me at college next year, just like he'd asked to. My mom told me that at the very end, he was still asking about my college decisions, and most of which I haven't received yet, but I know that even where I end up, he's always going to be proud of me, and he really did believe in me, and I will continue to be happy wherever I end up. It makes me sad that he's no longer going to be stopping by for dinner and an Eagles game on his drive down from Massachusetts, or lighting up the Seder with his contra-bass rendition of Go Down Moses. Truly show-stopping, if you never heard it. Even though the childhood memories are a little fuzzier now, I'm still grateful to have bits and pieces of the weekend Berkshire trips he brought Andrew and I on. I remember sitting on the tractor and mowing the lawn, catching frogs, and occasionally falling into the pond. I think Owen and I are the only two victims. We actually did fall into the pond. Wouldn't recommend. And him putting up fires for us on the chilly nights in the Berkshires. And of course, every dinner, holiday, and visit. Luckily, as you said, my Pop-Up was a great storyteller. And between me and my parents and Pop-Up's other family and friends, many of who are gathered here today, I know that I will always have my memories and those of others of my Pop-Up to cherish.
Very nice. And lastly, we're going to invite up Rachel.
Thank you all for being here today to honor my dad. It's been a very difficult past 6 weeks, but I feel very blessed to be surrounded by family and friends who have all meant so much to my father throughout his life. Over the past few days, I've been thinking about what to share about someone who always seemed larger than life. My father was tough and strong, and also gentle and warm. He always reminded me of a combination of Indiana Jones and a Clint Eastwood character. He certainly owned the right hats and wore them well. When he walked into a room with one of his signature hats, he certainly commanded attention. Even when he was sick at Kessler, I caught him listening to the soundtrack from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on a continuous loop on his phone. Thought that was a little bit unusual, but it was very soothing for him, and I thought that was very funny. But the hat made him easy to spot, but his big and warm personality made him impossible not to notice. Whenever my friends from middle and high school or college or even adult life met him, they were excited to hear his stories and learn new things. He seemed to always care for and about everyone. Over the last few days, it has warmed my heart to receive messages from dozens of people whom my dad touched in some way as their doctor or friend, or in many cases, both. One common theme is how much my dad cared about people. Of course, he cared for many of them as their doctor. So many people wrote to me about how my dad had helped them navigate a difficult medical situation. And you could hear in their notes the gratitude they had toward a man who put them at ease, knowing that he was going to help them deal with a complicated medical situation and showed them compassion along the way that is too often no longer a part of modern medicine. But my dad also cared about people outside of a medical context. My entire life, I witnessed how much my dad enjoyed engaging with people, whether it was my childhood friends, his friends and colleagues, or the family he cherished so much. My dad enjoyed learning about people, not from social media posts, but through old-fashioned conversation. Of course, if you got to spend time with my dad, you know he loved telling stories, as many people have said. But as much as he loved sharing what was on his mind, he also enjoyed getting to know people, engaging with them, and listening to their stories. If you spent just 15 minutes with my dad, you are likely to have been asked a dozen questions as he wanted to get to know you a bit better and understand your perspective on everything from world events to what it was that you were up to in your own personal or professional life. My dad had a way of making everyone feel special. Even during his final days, he would pepper me with questions about all of my friends as he cared for each of them. But for sure, what made my dad happiest was spending time with his family. It was the primary reason he purchased his home in the Berkshires 4 hours from his home in Morristown. He wanted a family compound where we could all come together. He was proud of all of his children and grandchildren and all of our accomplishments. I will miss his daily calls and voicemails where he would tell me how proud he was of Andrew's work on his Eagle Scout project and Hannah and Owen's musical theater performances, or Joshua's dexterity at completing jigsaw puzzles, or Sam's chess proclivity, or Jack's tossing a ball. His love and support of our family was unwavering. When Joshua had surgery this summer in Philadelphia and was in the hospital for several days, it meant so much to me and Joshua how he would come by our hospital room each day and just spend time with us. It is not surprising to me that my dad spent hours with us in the hospital, telling jokes and playing games. He was always thankful to be with his family. It really didn't matter what the activity was. He was up for anything as long as it involved his family. Whether it was going to Tanglewood to listen to a concert on the lawn, visiting the local goat farm in the Berkshires, skiing at Butternut, or watching a movie on the couch. If you asked my dad if he wanted to join in, his answer was always the same. Great, let's go. And that did include a lot of really strange horror films that he watched with my boys, I might add, which I can't believe he would watch with them. It was a little crazy. And he approached each of those experiences with a level of enthusiasm that was infectious. For anyone who ever enjoyed the pleasure of going out to a restaurant with my dad, you know he loved to live large. He ordered off a sushi menu the same way he wanted to live his life, not missing out and trying new things with those he loved. As he ended almost every toast that I can remember, my father would want me to end by wishing you all uninterrupted exacerbations of good things and life at its tip-top best. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Rachel. Beautiful. Kohelet wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of this world, never complete their tasks, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearn for yet another respite from that final summons, and how we yearn to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be now with those whose hearts are broken, because when parting comes, it always comes too soon. Console them at this hour. Be near to them when the light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing, and let us all say, Amen. I'd like us all now to just take a moment of silence. Bring Richard into your hearts and into your minds. And we say, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be for a blessing. May the memory of Dr. Richard Nemiroff endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to eternity, may we leave this life secure in the faith that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we invoke your almighty name. There are traditionally two prayers that conclude every Jewish service. In a moment, I will chant El Moli Rachamim, and later at the interment, we will say those holy words of the mourner's Kaddish. El Moli Rachamim, Shochem Bamromim, Hamse Menucha, Nechona Tachat Kanfe Hashkina, Im Kedoshim, Otohorim, Kehaz Hakaria HaMazirim, Et Nishmat, Eliezer ben Nachman Vevel, Shehalach Lamo, Baal Harachamim, Yaseteru Beseter Kenafav Lamim, Vayitror Bitror Hachamin et Nishmato, Adonaihu Nachlato, Vanuach Vashalom Al Kimishkavo, Venomar, Amen. Compassionate God, the eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Richard Nemiroff, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in everlasting life. God be his inheritance now. May he rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. In Judaism, they say there are three crowns: the crown of the Torah, the crown of the priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But a crown of a good name exceeds them all. Richard Nemiroff had a good name. May his memory endure among all of you as a blessing. And let us say once more, Amen.
We can rise once more, please.